Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. The choices that the defendant made were all a part of her plan. See, today, you're going to learn how a casino owner, the defendant, bribed a public official for that public official's vote on a new casino license. A casino license, members of the jury, that would allow that defendant to make millions of dollars and add a new legacy to her life. It all started back in October of 2014, members of the jury, when the Midlands Gambling Commission announced that they would be accepting proposals for a new casino license in the state of Midlands. That's when the defendant jumped on the opportunity. See, Avery Bancroft is the owner of the Black Bear Casino, and she wanted to be the first person in Midlands history to own 2 casinos in the state of Midlands. So members of the jury, what she did was take the easy way out when she used her free will to bribe a public official. Members of the jury, we know this because the defendant has already admitted to bribing that official. Today's case is a little different than what you might have expected. See, today's case is about blame. Today, the defense will come before you and they're going to raise something called an affirmative defense. Members of the jury, an affirmative defense allows that defendant to take on their own burden. See, they're going to come before you and they're going to tell you about their burden. They have to prove by a preponderance of the evidence, which simply means more likely than not, that the undercover investigator leading this investigation into the Midlands Gambling Commission, his actions were the reason that Ms. Bancroft committed this bribe. Members of the jury, they have to prove this first and foremost. And if they do meet this burden, then the prosecution takes on their own burden. See, us as the state, we have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Bancroft was predisposed to commit this crime. And she was. And we'll show that to you through 3 witnesses today. First, we'll call Officer Keenan himself. Officer Keenan is an undercover investigator with the Midlands Police Division. Now, members of the jury, he's going to tell you about the events leading up to the vote on April 17th of 2015. This vote was for that casino license where 3 members of the Midlands Gambling Commission voted in favor of Ms. Bancroft, 2-1. Members of the jury, he'll tell you that Mr. Covington, the person that Ms. Bancroft bribed, was the swing vote, and Ms. Bancroft knew that. So on April 16th, 2015, she went into the Black Bear Casino, her own casino, and met Chase Covington and bribed him. She did this on her own accord. She used her free will to make her choice. Members of the jury, you'll see today that the defendant, she made her choices. And she made her choices that were all a part of her plan. Second, we'll call Dr. Reese Warren. Dr. Reese Warren is a linguist with the Midlands State Police Division. He teaches at the Midlands State University as well on linguistics, and linguistics is simply the study of languages. Dr. Reese Warren will talk about the guidelines that Mickey Keelan had to follow in order to proceed with this investigation, and that he did everything to a T. Members of the jury, he'll show you that Mickey Keelan simply showed Ms. Bancroft the opportunity, and Ms. Bancroft latched on to make her choice. Lastly, we'll call Devin Del Sesto to the stand. Ms. Del Sesto is a bellhop at the defendant's own casino. She'll talk about the events leading up to August 17th. And she'll specifically talk about the day of April 16th, when Ms. Bancroft bribed Chase Covington. She'll tell you that Mickey Keelan was nowhere around. And that's because the defendant did this with her own free will. At the end of today's trial, my co-counsel will come before you and ask that you find her guilty for the choices that she made. Thank you.
Defense ready for their opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to proceed?
Yes.
May it please the court. Bancroft was in the red. In June of 2013, undercover investigative officer Detective Keenan was assigned to investigate the Midlands Gambling Commission for signs of corruption. Detective Keenan was looking for corruption within the Gambling Commission and specifically within the Department of Chase Covington, the head of the commission and the swing vote. In October of 2014, the Midlands Gambling Commission announced that they would be giving another license for a new casino. And that's when Ava Bancroft, a casino owner within Midlands, decided that she wanted to apply for the new casino. Now, Ms. Bancroft already owned the Black Bear Casino within Midlands. But the Black Bear was on razor-thin margins. Ms. Bancroft needed a new casino in order to diversify her business and help with her profits. Detective Keenan saw this as a chance to infiltrate Ms. Bancroft's company, and he's the reason why we're here today. We are not here today because Ms. Bancroft bribed Chase Covington, because Ms. Bancroft already admitted to that. We are here today because of the actions of Detective Keenan. Detective Keenan was the one who told Ms. Bancroft that the only way that she would ever get this new casino license was by bribing Chase Covington. Members of the jury, today the prosecution has to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt the highest burden in our legal system that Ms. Bancroft was predisposed. But they will fail to meet this burden because Ms. Bancroft was not predisposed. It was the actions of Detective Keenan. Because Detective Keenan induced Ms. Bancroft to commit this crime, we as a defense have taken on our own burden, the burden of preponderance of the evidence, which simply means more likely than not. Imagine all the testimony that you will hear today on a set of scales. You will place weights on these scales based on reliability, credibility, and biases. If the scales tip ever so slightly within our favor, even the weight of a grain of sand, we will have proved our burden to you. Let's imagine the burden in two questions. First, did Detective Keenan offer more than just the opportunity for Ms. Bancroft to bribe Mr. Covington? In other words, did he give her more than just encouragement? And second, was it only the actions of Detective Keenan that caused Ms. Bancroft to bribe Mr. Covington? In order to meet our burden today, members of the jury, we will call three witnesses. First, we will call J.D. Lorian, an auditor and owner of Greylord Strategies. He will tell you that through his work with undercover police agencies, that he investigated Detective Keenan's undercover operation, and that Detective Keenan lacked documentation and that he failed to meet the undercover guidelines set before by the Attorney General of the United States, meaning that Keenan's investigation was flawed and could raise red flags that Keenan was the reason that Ms. Bancroft bribed Mr. Covington. Second, we will call Corey Hyde, Ms. Bancroft's executive assistant, and he will tell you about the workings of Bancroft Industries, how the Black Bear was on razor-thin margins and Ms. Bancroft needed a way to diversify her business, and that Detective Keenan was always the one that brought up the bribe, and that Corey Hyde himself was Detective Keenan's informant. At this point in the trial, you might be wondering, why didn't Ava Bancroft just walk away? And that's why she herself will come up and testify and tell you how the Black Bear was on razor-thin margins and that she was in the red. She needed this new casino because there was no way she was going to survive without it. Ms. Bancroft will tell you about Detective Keenan, about Chase Covington, and about the Black Bear. At the end of today's trial, my co-counsel Mitchell Bill will come before you and piece together the story, and you will be able to answer all of the questions with a clear and resounding yes, because Ava Bancroft wasn't predisposed to bribe Detective Keenan. She was in the red, and he induced her.
Is the prosecution ready for your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Detective